Well, let's talk to the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Good to see you this morning. Can we talk about this to begin with? Because I know there are 400 cases, I think, of Indian variant reported in the capital so far. Would you support the idea of just vaccinating all age groups now?
Well, in general terms, I understand the advice from the government and the experts to go by age. But actually, in those parts of the country where there are pockets of people who have this Indian variant, I think we should be nimble and we should be giving the vaccine to younger people in those areas. Why? Because the early evidence is if you receive the vaccine, less likely to catch this variant. The spread is less serious, but also the consequences, should you catch, are less serious as well. So I think we should be nimble. And I've asked both Matt Hancock and Nazim Zahawi, the various ministers, on Friday, to give us the flexibility to give younger people the vaccine in those parts of London where we're concerned about this strain.
I was going to say, for somewhere the size of the capital, I mean, you couldn't do it across the whole population, could you?
And that's why I understand what the government are saying and the health advice across the country is. What we're saying, though, is be nimble in relation to, in those pockets where we know there's an issue, let's use the vaccine sensibly. So in London, the good news is we're now testing everybody who's tested positive, the gene sequence, to see whether they've got this particular Indian variant. So we know which parts of our city there's a concern. And so what we should be doing in those particular boroughs is having a hyper-local approach and encouraging those who are younger, who'd have to wait a few weeks to have the vaccine now to avoid this strain spreading. I
mean, do you have the authority to do that? I mean, could you, as we're seeing in Bolton, they just seem to have said, we're just going to do it. Do you have that authority? Well,
it's the NHS who administer the vaccine. They're working incredibly hard. It's been a great success with local communities. The NHS have got to follow the advice from up above. That's why I approached Matt Hancock and Nazim Zahawi on Friday, asking for this flexibility, which I think is really important. The virus isn't rigid and doesn't follow rigid rules, and we've got to be nimble in relation to our response to it.
I mean, the problem you're going to face in the capital, presumably, is where you have these various pockets. I mean, one of the things that is going to change today is we are going to see more people back on public transport, back on the buses, back on the tubes. It's going to spread, isn't it?
Well, a number of things. Firstly, the good news now versus the peak in last winter was we have reduced the amount of people with the virus by 98%. We've reduced those in hospital by 96% because people have made sacrifices. But also we finally have an effective test and trace system. So anybody who tests positive, we can trace who they've been in contact with. And that's why I'm encouraging all Londoners and those across the country, test regularly. You can get free lateral flow tests, test twice a week as a habit, and separately take a PCR test regularly. The good news in London is if somebody does a PCR test and they unfortunately test positive, we check what strain they've got, and also we track and trace as well.
I mean, obviously, today with things opening up, I know you're sort of heading a campaign to try and get more people out and about and eating in London, which I know a lot of people are going to want to do it. I don't think you're going to have a huge amount of problem persuading people. But, I mean, it's a difficult sort of circle to square, isn't it, in that you've got to protect the capital's businesses whilst protecting the population.
Yeah, look, the health of individuals is linked with the health of our economy. But here's the good news: cool bars, restaurants, cultural attractions, hospitality venues—they've worked so hard to make sure their places are COVID safe. Of course, we've got to still follow the rules: social distance, wash your hands regularly and thoroughly, wear a face mask when you use public transport. But I think Londoners and those across the country are raring to go in a safe way. So we've begun the biggest domestic tourism campaign London's ever seen, encouraging Londoners to come back to the West End and encouraging those across the country who may be a bit crestfallen they can't go on the international holidays. Don't worry, everything you need is in London.
I was going to say, because that's ultimately the problem, isn't it, with a lack of international and national tourists and the hybrid working, which means people aren't just popping out to buy a sandwich in their lunch hour or what have you. I mean, that footfall is going to be well down.
Well, here's the good news. This is probably the only spring and summer when you aren't competing against international tourists. So you can go to the world's best museums and galleries and not need to queue. You can get a booking at one of our best restaurants without needing to get a booking. And it's really important that we, of course, have a good time, stay safe, but also protect jobs. And the reality is 1 out of 5 Londoners works in hospitality or culture. And so you can safely have a great time, but also support British business.
Look, and it's nice to have a positive outlook. I think we all want a little bit of that at the moment. On a less positive front, can I just ask you about the anti-Semitism? Obviously, the situation that's going on in Israel and Gaza is hugely concerning, and people can have their views on that. But what we have seen is some incidents in London, and if you've seen the clips on YouTube and what have you, I mean, some absolute vile language, which is anti-Semitic, and absolutely vile. Now, what are you doing to try and calm the temperature on that and protect the Jewish community in London?
Well, I've been in contact this weekend with both the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner, and the police are working incredibly hard. And it's important for me to make this point. It is possible at the same time to be very angry about what's happening in Israel and Gaza and the West Bank and be heartbroken at the death and to call for a ceasefire and a de-escalation. What's not excusable is, on the other hand, to use it as an excuse to be anti-Semitic and to be racist. There can be no excuse for that. So Jewish Londoners in particular will see in the communities where they live, but also synagogues and Jewish schools, an increased police presence, just to make you feel safe, but also to make sure anybody who's involved in any race crimes, and they are crimes, by the way, action is taken. And it's important for us to realise that actually the impact of this criminal behaviour has a ripple of fear effect on Jewish Londoners and those across the country. And it's really important that we don't bring conflicts 3,000 miles away to the capital city.
OK. Sadiq Khan, good to talk to you. Thank you.